Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are at home watching this live stream on YouTube, we appreciate you for taking the time. And if you are also on this Zoom call, we also appreciate you for taking the time. Tonight will be an exciting night as we delve into the topic of digital transformation in the realm of Education 5.0. Before we go on any further, I'd like to introduce myself. I am the host for tonight and I will be moderating the panel. My name is Joy Garingo from the company Cebu. Thank you again for joining us tonight. So before we go on and go and push through the whole panel, let us first introduce, I'd like to introduce our collaborators, the people and the organizations who have made this event possible. We have three major we have three major supporters of this event. We have Fukuoka Growth Next, Q, and the company Cebu. So I'd like to call on the representative from Fukuoka Growth Next, Mr. Yuki Sakiyami. Hi, Mr. Yuki. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Hello, everyone. I'm Yuki. I am staff of Fukuoka Next. We are the incubation facility in Fukuoka, which used to be elementary school. We are supporting startup in Fukuoka, and of course, we are supporting also entrepreneurs and startups from overseas like Taiwan or Philippines or Indonesia. And thank you for coming. And please enjoy and learn a lot of things in this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your support, Mr. Yuki. I would like to remind all those who are in the Zoom call to please mute your mute your devices if you are not being called to talk. Thank you so much, Mr. Yuki Sakiyama, and we are very grateful for your support, especially for this event. Thank you. So now let's go to our next collaborator from Q. Hi, Tien. How are you? Good evening.
How are you, Joe?
I'm good. I'm doing great. Actually,
Yeah,
I'm
thank
very
you for
excited.
your thank you for your facilitating. And yes, this is Tian from Q, which is a new co-working space located in Fukuoka, in the center of Hakata Station, which is the biggest station in Fukuoka City. And the same as if Fukuoka grows, that we are also a co-working space try to help startups. And today's speaker, Pablo, is one of our members to support his business and also promote our co-working space. We be the supporter of today's event. Thank you, and hope you guys enjoy tonight's event.
Thank you so much, Tian. I think it's a very good act of community that you are helping Pablo with his goal to touch base with different sectors, especially in the education realm, right? So now, tonight, Pablo will be talking mainly to a Filipino demographic with, of course, we have friends from Australia who is joining us, right? So thank you so much, Tian. Now I want to call on our representative from the company Cebu, Jaira. Hi, Jai. Good evening.
Everyone, good evening. Yes, so I'm Jai, from the community manager of the company Cebu. I've been working with them for almost 4 years now, and it was indeed an amazing journey. I've witnessed the growth of the businesses here and there. So, to those people who don't know us, the company is an international co working space that offers flexible offices, workstations, virtual offices, and event space. We also provide consultation services such as for lawyers, accountants, and other professionals. We are also a very startup friendly community, co-working community, and we have built strong relationship with startup community. And we are actively doing collaborations with them, just like this Sunagaro Editech. So yeah, so if you guys need any of our services or if you wish to connect or collaborate with us, our contact details will be shown later please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to be one of your partners. I think that's it. So have a great evening.
Thanks so much, Jai. And I really appreciate all three organizations coming together to talk about this, to talk and support about this wonderful topic regarding digital transformation, Education 5.0. So let's get down to it, right? Let's get to know the panelists for tonight. Let's start with our very own Pablo Riveros, the founder of Tsunagaru EduTech. Hi, Pablo. Good evening. Mind if you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Good.
Hi.
I'm good.
Well, thank you so much for having us here tonight. And yes, well, my name is Pablo. I'm the CEO and founder of Tsunagaru EduTech. And our company, it's an startup enterprise focused on digital learning and DX and education. And we're founded this year. But personally, I have international experience on online education and also in education and also in kind of high education. So thank you very much, and welcome everyone to this webinar.
Thank you so much, Pablo. And I look forward to hearing more about the solutions that you present to the education sector. Next, we have Julian De Paul from IE University. Hi, Julian. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great. Thank you so much. It's really excited to be here tonight. It's still the morning. I'm based in Spain, so it's a bit earlier here. So I might be the freshest one today. I'm really excited. So I'm working at IE University. I'm part of a department dedicated to digital learning. I'm director of operations, and my job is dedicated to offering online solution and bringing the content and the quality of content from IE University around the globe. And I enjoy saying that I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a nerd as concerned EdTech. So I'm really excited to be part of this panel and to look forward to enjoying this conversation with my colleagues and with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you also. I am very excited to learn about your case studies later on during the panel. Now, last but not the least, we have James Cannon from Kyushu University. Hi, James. Good evening. Can you tell us more about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Joy. Hello, everybody. I am an associate professor at Kyushu University here in Fukuoka. I have, in terms of academic experience, I've been teaching for 5 or 6 years now. A lot of that using more modern teaching techniques, I would say, in comparison to maybe the traditional lecture. In addition to the academic side of things, I also ran a EdTech startup as a full-time second job until very recently. So I hope that my academic and also kind of business startup EdTech experience can contribute positively to the discussion today. And thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think that's a really good intro to the backgrounds of our panelists. And I'd like to ask them to turn on their cameras so that we can begin the panel discussion. So of course, we'd like to set the stage, right, before we go on any further. So when we talk about digital transformation, a lot of people think about, making all the modules in digital form, making it accessible through the web, right? But I think there's more to it than that. And we're here to talk about that. So when we talk about digital transformation, let's first define what it means for each one of you, right? What is digital transformation for you, and where does it start? Does it start when schools begin scanning books, right? For people to make it more accessible online? Is it that, or is it simply taking webinars like this? Is this what is digital transformation? So let us start with with Pablo.
Hi. Yes. Well, digital transformation is a really wide word, right? It's like kind of now it's very trending because the corona pandemic and more institution. I'm talking about DX in Japan, in my case, everyone is talking about digital transformation. Digital transformation, we can simply say that I will give you one simple example. In Japan, the people use hanko, that is a stamp for all the documents in all the process, paperwork things. Now we are talking about digital hanko, the digital signature. That's just a very simple example, what it's about digital transformation in the digital world. Transforming experience paper-based, paperless concept into digital. And more than that, in education, it's actually transforming the entire student experience, provide more flexibility, more using new emerging technologies like VR, mixed reality, digital learning. But the most important also for digital DX transformation is also how we can train the staff, academic staff, educational teachers, and so on. So that's just a simple answer for how, in my opinion, DX.
Thanks so much, Pablo. That's a really cohesive answer, right? And a good introduction to our panel tonight. Julian, I'd like to know what your thoughts are in terms of what you think digital transformation constitutes.
Yeah, I fully agree with Pablo. I think he made a great answer, and there is this particularity in education where I enjoy saying that there is difference with other industry where in general the digital transformation help to focus much more on the user. In higher education, in education, I like to say that we have two users. We have on one side obviously the learner, and it's really important for us to focus on the learner. But on the other side, we have the faculty, which is not a user per se, but it's actually someone that have to be involved since the beginning as part of the digital, any thought related to digital transformation, because is a key actor. So something really interesting about the digital transformation in education, it's focusing on the learner journey from the marketing moment to the certification, the diploma, the graduation, etc. So it's wide, and at the same time, you have to consider the faculty, the teacher, the professor, because they are really, really important in this transformation.
I agree. I like that you highlight that in digital transformation, it doesn't only involve the learner, but of the faculty or of the facilitator for some educators, right? It really depends on how you look at education or what your philosophy of it is. But I love that you have included the facilitators or the teachers in their role in the digital transformation. So James, I'd like to, so since Julian mentioned about the faculty, right? And you are you are an associate professor at Kyushu University. So you know how to roll this out and what your role is in the digital transformation of your industry. I'd like to know more about what you think and how you define digital transformation in terms of like professors.
Yes, that's very interesting. I think both Pablo and Julian brought up very good points in relation to the need to train faculty in order to be able to deliver the digital transformation that does enhance education. And then at the same time, as Julian very well pointed out, you've got to bring the learners along as well. And so I think this makes the digital transformation in education particularly challenging. And there's a lot, and Pablo highlighted the Hanko, there's a lot going on, right, with digital transformation in general. But I think for education especially, it's an opportunity because education has kind of stayed the same, been the same for hundreds of years, right? Really hundreds of years. And I think that when we engage in digital transformation, it shouldn't simply be increase in efficiency, which changing to a digital Hanko, for example, will do, but actually an opportunity to improve the situation. So, for example, being able to get more two-way conversations between the teacher and the student instead of the traditional one-way conversation. So I think augmenting, going beyond the limits of what we have been until now been able to do using digital transformation is really the key, I think, for this topic for me.
Agreed. I would like to highlight on education, right? Not changing. Its nature has not changed in 100 of years, but the method or the modes of how it's being spread, how it's being laid out is ever changing, depending on the industries, right? And the revolutions, the industrial revolutions that has happened already. So then we can say that the whole digital transformation the whole DX that is happening across all industries is merely an effect of the tools that are now available. It's like everything getting updated. And now, since our tools are getting more digital and are getting more intelligent, right, and are getting more intuitive, we'd like to talk about what then is the barrier if we implement these tools, the newest tools now that are available in terms of transforming the education industry, right? So we'd like to talk about this more. So let's start with that. So if we were to implement these digital solutions, this digital transformation plan, what then are the barriers, right? So that are involved in the transformation. So let's start with Pablo.
Yes. Well, there are many barriers, right? One of my personal experience working in DX digital learning education is the impact that these rapidly digital innovations just suddenly appear in many institutions, public institutions, but also universities. We found that many academics that didn't have the expertise how to run online courses, and at the same time, they're resistant to change. So that is one of the barriers in my case that I found it. We can have an amazing iPads in the classroom, but if we don't teach the teacher how to properly use the iPad, that could be completely difficult. So that is the value that how important it is to provide digital transformation in the training. But at the same time, it's not just about only the teachers. The students, we identify that the barriers that digital transformation is happening. It's because the UNESCO identified that the equal education in the Sustainable Development Goal, there's a large developing countries that the student they can't afford iPads and mobile devices, and many those countries are being very, very high impact through the pandemic. So we can talk about digital education in developed nations that where they can afford very advanced technologies in the classroom. But what happened with developing countries that they cannot even have a laptop or smartphone. So that's something that when we talk about digital education, we have to think about the very focus is all connected with the SDGs and how we can be more equal opportunities, not only for rich countries, but also for developing nations. So
agree. And it's what you're saying now is what is happening in the Philippines. The Philippines is one of the developing countries, right? And I think most of our audience tonight who are watching are from the Philippines. So we all know that access to technology is a privilege, not a right. And access to internet is a privilege, not a right. What do you call this? The law, the legislators have been trying to pass a bill to make internet available, but the elephant in the room is always, okay, so how can people afford gadgets? And if they can afford gadgets, can they afford the load, or can they even go to areas where public internet is available? So geographically speaking, the Philippines is challenged in terms of this. So since we have like mountains and rural areas, basically, there are a lot of rural areas that do not enjoy the same bandwidth when it comes to the internet, right? We also have families who cannot afford a phone. So in terms And I think this is a great barrier to digital transformation. And I'm very interested with what Julian thinks about this. So Julian has had experience in implementing systems, right? In making sure that the university that you're working for has a successful, what you call this, system in terms of how you have transformed digitally. I'd like to know more about what barriers have you found when you did transform your university's educational system?
Yeah, thank you. I had the opportunity to work in 5 different countries and always in higher education. And what Pablo mentioned is this, the change is complicated for everybody, especially in digital transformation for many reasons. One of them, it's obviously the legacy. You've been working in this way during years. Why would you change? What should you change right now? Then there is the changing can mean taking risk. So we all avoid taking risks. It's complicated to change. And something really specific for the digitalization, it's actually the vision. Most of the time there's this confusion between different areas, and so people have really difficulties to have the right vision, a right strategy, understanding what will involve this digital transformation. So in my experience, something that came back again and again, it's the collaboration between different departments. Digital transformation, it's about working across silos, and so pushing a lot of the communication, making sure that each stakeholder is involved at the same time, etc. And sometimes can get really complicated. The only aspect to come back with the notion of digital, it's most of the time the IT department, it's an IT department. And the digital department, it's a digital department. And both of them, they are doing things super different. And sometimes they still have this confusion that might be silly, sounds silly what I'm saying, but for a lot of academic institutions, that makes a lot of sense. Someone at some point working in IT, switch into digital, but the approach it's really different. So yeah, to summarize a little bit, I will say there's this implement the main barrier is having a clear view on the clear vision of what will be the digital transformation, what will be your digital strategy, what it's involved for you, and then how you can work, make sure that all the team involved can work together and understand what digital transformation will be with them. Yeah.
I like that you are giving a different view on the barrier of digital transformation. So earlier Pablo gave us like an overview of the difficulty of the learner, right, of the student. But in your point of view, you have stressed the barriers of digital transformation when it comes to the stakeholders, the ones who are manning the digital institution. So I'm very interested to discuss about this more, about how you have overcome these barriers, right, in terms of the silos that you were talking about the departments communicating with each other, and what can be like a possible solution for this, right?
Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, just to keep going on that, I think what is something really important, and I guess I would jump on that for further ideas of solution. Is the capability to start small and start implementing pilots. You don't have to change your entire legacy and the approach from a week to another one. You can go step by step, and by working in implementing pilots, you build this trust between the different departments. And so implementing pilots, integrating the digital transformation, step by step. It's much easier. And also it helps you to fail very quickly. So the relation with the risk, it's less important that if you decide to go for something big from a day to another one.
I agree. But once we talk about launching pilots, right? We have to talk about prioritizing the barriers. So where do you start? How do you start? Which aspect of digital transformation as an institution should you look at first?
So is it still for me?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, very quickly. So it's always the same, and there is a lot of entrepreneurs with us today. And when you're an entrepreneur, what you start making the difference in when you start identifying the problem and bringing the solution. So the best way to start in digital transformation is identifying problems that could solve something for the learner or solve something for the faculty, especially in education. As soon as you identify these pain points for both of them, it's much easier for you to start identifying the right pilot and start step by step implementing something.
I see. Thank you so much, Julian. So we're now talking about the barriers, and then we've talked about the barriers of digital transformation for the learner, which Pablo has already touched upon, and for the faculty, from Julian. And then James, I'm interested to know what you think what do you think is the biggest barrier of digital transformation in the realm of education?
Yeah, so I think that Pablo and Julian both bring up very, very good points about barriers. And when you first asked that question, the first thing that popped into my head was, well, there are lots of cultural barriers. So, right, things have always been done as they have been done, and changing is always hard. But I think Julian and Pablo covered those points very well. I agreed with Julian in particular in that starting small is important. At the university, at Kyushu University, I do teacher training for and active learning, this sort of thing. And what we did actually this year was to ask the teachers, okay, what exactly is your problem? Why aren't you implementing active learning? And they come back with a whole host of reasons, including one of the big ones being that I'm worried that the students will not be happy, or it's difficult to get the students to come on board. So there's definitely this cultural aspect, and we can talk more about how you overcome that. But I also thought Joy, you brought up, where you highlighted a very good point in terms of access to technology, and Pablo was also talking about this in developing countries, and it's very easy to forget living in Japan, which is relatively wealthy. You know, a lot of people don't have access to education at all, at whatever level or quality. So one thing that Challenge Hub, the startup that I was kind of running as a full-time second job until recently, was doing. It's focusing on open education, so trying to encourage teachers to share the material that they have. And one barrier to that is in countries like the UK, where I'm originally from, and also in Australia and the US, sharing material from the university is actually very difficult, because the university is essentially a business, and that it wants to maintain a high reputation. Whereas in countries, we actually never spoke to anyone in the Philippines, but we were talking to people in other Southeast Asian countries, Malaysia and places like this. And there was much more willingness, and you know, sharing was no problem. So there are some, I guess, institutional difficulties as well that have to be overcome. But starting small and demonstrating success is I think the way to go.
Agreed. I like that we are now transitioning into providing solutions for the barriers that we have mentioned earlier. So let's hop on the solutions. Let's discuss solutions now. So Pablo, you've mentioned about access, right? Difficulty of developing countries to access technology, therefore educational technology too. So what do you think is a good solution for this barrier?
Yes, I completely agree with what James and Julian mentioned before about the piloting. This we say in Japan we try to do the POC, proof of concept, and if it's work well, we go in the large scales, and that's also part of the how we can provide this kind of accessibility. To just give you an example, we were working in one project with Indonesia, and one of our partners here, Dentajori, we are working in this project, and the difficulty is to bring this kind of LMS or learning management system and to provide this kind of hybrid learning that students are in Indonesia, we are in Japan with teachers in Japan. It was a video discussions and what kind of platform will be the best. And there's thousands of LMS platforms on the market. But at the same time, we identified that also at some open source platform. But at the same time, for example, a Google Classroom, there's quite affordable and it's easy to access. And the good things about low-cost platform, it's very effective for developing countries. Let's say Moodle. Moodle is an LMS that is very basic open source platform, but allow us to experts in the field and professors, universities to use this kind of tool in the proper way. But at the same time, when I'm talking about accessibility, sometimes teachers, in my case, they forgot that they have for example, in Japan, there have some students overseas, like kind of Vietnam, Indonesia, or Philippines, that their internet connection is really good. So how we can engage with this student in a remote village or things like that. And the one simple thing is just transforming this kind of content in PDF, just a simple one, that the student can download the PDF format and just print, or have access into. So when we work in the design in digital models or online education, we always have to think about not from the teaching's point of view. That's when we work with companies, institutions here, we always try to tell professors, let's focus more in student-centered learning than teaching-centered. The students are important here. So when we think about from the point of view from the student, the entire online education change. Because we think that we have to think about this student kind of access. Maybe I don't have iPad, and then we start identify what kind of tools we can use it. And as James mentioned, there's millions of open educational resources, OERs, that is a way well known. And even now, UNESCO in the Life of Learning units are promoting the OER as the future of education should be well connected with the open educational resources and the collaboration between institutions that have more resources share the content with more with no proper technology or resources. So
and I think governments play a huge role, right, in making technology accessible for those who cannot access it. And thankfully, here in the Philippines, there's been reform to make education and technology more available for the general public, especially for those who can't afford, right? Those who are in public schools. But the problem when it comes to transition, right? So right now, everyone is forced to migrate. Everyone was forced to migrate to a digital world, right? When the pandemic came to be. So when that happened, whether institutions liked it or not, if they won't migrate to a digital platform, they will lose business. They will not have students because it would be literally unsafe for schools to hold one-on-one classes. So there has been a huge shift, a huge instant shift, and it happened overnight. And because of that happening, governments had to subsidize, right? Governments had to make sure everyone had access to technology. Here in the Philippines, the modules are being aired on TV. So there's like a specific channel that students can go on and then watch their modules in, or watch their teacher, or whatever. And then there's also other processes would involve students going to the school I think once a week, so that they can pick up modules like those in paper. So those were the solutions that were presented for those who cannot access education. But even so, the problem is the transition. There's been a friction, right? And we'd like to also address that when we move forward. So I'd like to hear from Julian and then James.
So, yeah, with the pandemic, the friction has been obvious. It was really complicated for a lot of institutions to from a day to another one switch 100% online. But at the same time, I guess something really positive from someone who's been working in digital learning for a while now. And don't get me wrong when I say thanks to the pandemic, but thanks to the pandemic, we actually probably win about 5 to 10 years in digital learning. So we much faster. We had to push this conversation that previous to the pandemic was taking 2 years, 3 years for an implementation, for the production of a content, for should we go synchronous, should we go asynchronous, should we use this LMS, should we use another platform, etc. Where we have to decide everything in a couple of weeks. So for people working in digital learning, that's been almost a blessed, because well, we had to focus on something, and now what everybody is realized that teaching online, learning online, that was something pretty positive as well. And now, which is really exciting, and a lot of institutions are talking about that, it's this opportunity of hybrid, combining presential, online, asynchronous, synchronous, immersive learning, etc., etc. So some friction, definitely, but a lot of positive behind. That's the most important, I guess.
I think that, yes, it has its merits, right? But it does have its merits. Like as you said, it's been a wonderful time for those in the digital transformation industry. So James, what do you think about this barrier, the transition, right? So the almost instant change and the transition, the effect of the transition to those in the digital learning sector has been great. It has been amazing. But for learners who do not know how to navigate, or even the teachers themselves who do not use these advanced types of technology, there's been an effect, and I think a lot of studies would show that there is, and as we see on headlines here in the Philippines, right? One student committed suicide because he had like low marks or something like that, right? So these are very sensitive conversations to have, but very important conversations as well. So the effects of this transitions could be as intense as demoralizing for teachers even. So how do we address this? What is a solution to this barrier, the transition, right?
Yeah, so I want to actually bring in another perspective, kind of more from a startup perspective, because we've touched so far on the transformation within universities, and there were a lot of challenges with this, and it was done in a very short time, as Julian mentioned. And a lot of the friction and the challenges about the digital transformation has come about in many ways, I feel, because the teachers and the learners are trying to take what has been offline and trying to reproduce that in an online environment. And it often doesn't work, right? So the very good example from higher education is that when you lecture on Zoom, you know, everyone has their camera off, and you can't tell if anyone's there. And if you're lecturing for an hour, is anyone really listening, right? It's so there's I think any attempt to reproduce what we had offline in its entirety online would be a mistake. So another I guess, and I hesitate to say positive aspect of the pandemic, but one thing that has happened with the pandemic is that a lot of edtech startups have really flourished because of this need for the sudden change. And some of them are offering support to the traditional ways of teaching. So like Zoom is a very good example. You can now give a lecture through your computer instead of in person. But a lot of other edtech startups, I think, have focused more towards, so for example, more personalized learning, right? YouTube is a very good example. I mean, YouTube has been around for a long time, of course, but if you ask students where they're learning, where they're getting their lectures from, a lot of them will say, well, we do a search on YouTube, and they learn and pause and rewind and do things like that. So yes, there are barriers that it's difficult to transition, but I feel that if you transition and take advantage of the new format instead of trying to reproduce the old format, that the transition is much smoother.
I like that you mentioned that, right? So I'd like to learn more about this happening, right? When I'd like to know, I guess what I'd like to know is about how you were able to do this, any case studies or any real life experiences that you have gone through with the university that you're working with now, or any projects that you have of late that successfully implemented digital transformation.
Yeah, so from my classes, so I had a class today, actually, and I'm trying not to advertise my startup, but I used the teaching method that my startup produced, and essentially the students, so I don't lecture, the students engage in doing challenges. So they work through independently doing challenges, and every challenge contains a question and contains a reference to material, which can be a YouTube video, it can be a book chapter. Because one big problem that teachers had when they tried to do enhanced learning, flipped classroom, is they would say to their students, okay, read this ahead of class, and then when you come to class, I'm not going to teach it, I'm just going to ask you questions, we'll do some discussion. And about half the class usually doesn't do that, right? And to be honest, when I was a student, I probably wouldn't have done that either. But so with the challenge-based approach, it's like, here's the question. If you can answer the question, you don't have to read this. But the focus is the question. So if you can't do it, and mostly students have trouble, then you can refer to the resources. So this pattern of focusing on the challenge seems to have worked quite well, and with me, and then we had obviously other teachers using the platform as well. And the classroom then was very much focused on discussion, and you could do anything, right? You had lots of time there.
I see.
So that's a case study. That's how I have done this.
So just curious, so what you do is, as the teacher, you present a challenge and then you ask your class to solve the challenge, and you use a platform to gather the output of these challenges.
Basically, so it's like homework. I give the students 10 challenges to do, and they can do that in their own time. And because they have the access to the videos on YouTube, or that I pinpoint exactly where they should be looking. So they're not searching. It's not a problem-based learning. It's very specific.
Okay.
But they know exactly, okay, if I look exactly here, I'm going to be able to learn enough to answer the challenge. And then when they come to class, I can, with the platform, I can see, what challenges were easy, what were hard. So if I do a mini lecture, I can focus on the stuff that was hard, and I don't talk about the stuff that was easy. I don't waste their time. So.
Oh, okay. So there's a hierarchy of the tasks or of the challenges.
Yeah.
I see. That's a great case study, and I hope our listeners at home, especially those who are teachers, can implement this in their classrooms. Thanks so much, James. Julian, what do you have any case studies or projects that you might want to share with us regarding digital transformation?
There's a couple of them I'm really excited about. I was mentioning, so these two types of user, on one side the learner, and on the other side the faculty, the professor, the teacher. So I will mention first, and I love working with EdTech. So we identify in EdTech, the name is Noodle Factory. I'm going to share it here. And so that was for the faculty. So one of the pain points of our faculty, it's obviously the time. Creating a content, creating a course, especially when you go online with a lot of students, it's time consuming. And so we were looking to articulate artificial intelligence for our faculty, making sure that at some point they can use this kind of technology and that they can use them, but at the same time that it could be helpful for the student. And so thanks to this EdTech, what they're offering to us, it's the opportunity for the faculty to create a lot of questions in a few seconds, just downloading, uploading their content, then the artificial intelligence behind identifying a really interesting question. Then the faculty can just pick the questions, and the rest is for the student to use the chatbot and go on the different question. The question will be personalized, and for the faculty, it's also really interesting data because they can learn if the student really understand the question, or if they actually have a lack of understanding around the questions, etc., etc. So the tool is obviously really helpful for the faculty because it helps him to create a lot of questions and help him with the content really easily. But at the same time, it help him to understand, and something that mentioned Pablo earlier, the personalization, help him to understand in a really personalized way how the student is actually understanding the course and the content. The other one, more for the other example that I'm really excited about, it's was specifically for the student, and something happened almost by serendipity. It's we launched, so we were really excited about the virtual reality aspect. So we launched a small pilot with a EdTech called Verbella, which offer kind of a second life virtual reality space. And so for the faculty, it was at the beginning really complicated to enjoy the platform, but for the student, it became something really natural. And instead of being in Zoom, they had their own space. And so what happened, it's students starting to share in TikTok and social network that they were using actually this platform. And so what happened, it's from a small pilot for a short number of students, there was such a huge excitement for the student around the platform that one of the previous institutions I worked with in Mexico, they decided to implement it for all the institutions. And so now the student, they can enjoy being in an immersive context. They can work together through the avatar, but they can also just have fun on the platform. They can have class on the platform, etc., etc. So here are a couple of different view on the a couple of edtech I've been really excited about.
I like that. So far, right? The case studies that you've mentioned are really new and are fit for the digital classroom. It does not try to replicate what the physical classroom, the one-on-one sessions are, or the one-to-many physical classes are. And I'm very interested to know more about Pablo's Tsunagaru EduTech. So any case studies and projects that you are working on? I've seen that you've worked with dentist.
Correct. This is one of the that's one of the projects that we are working with our partners, and that's like I mentioned before. It's exporting the hybrid learning education from dental industry, and the teachers are physically here in Japan, and their students are in Indonesia, connecting with this kind of. But it's not simple like using Zoom. Connecting and start recording the lectures with the dentistry. It's just more than that, and it's become before of that. It was a training how the teachers should learn to transform that kind of face-to-face experience on now using the new technologies, and that is one of the cases. But the latest one that we did, one of the largest universities here in Japan, and one of the teachers during the pandemics. He didn't know how to switch from face-to-face lessons to online. And then in 6 weeks, we transformed her course face-to-face online. And during this process, it was just training for the teachers only online, create that kind of learning modules that they could be very easy to understand. Because when we have a teacher, when we have I know how to do it, they're missing one very important part, that there are some experts that kind of as digital learning experts that we can identify what could be the best content to provide. So that's again, teachers control the classes, but there are some experts like digital edtech companies that can help them to assist them to transform this experience. And then in this case, when the teacher give some of the tips, it was created questions after every lesson, every weekly lessons, to get the feedback from students. What do you think about my lessons? So in the beginning, some teachers, they really don't want to, because they think, I'm a teacher, right? I know how to teach. But I say, but honestly, you need to know the feedback from your students, right? Because you have to be able to listen to them. So when the teacher was a little bit no, but then she realized, and then how value is to provide very short 5 questions to the teachers, and then you get that kind of feedback. Because that when I said to teacher, you can improve your online experience just with simple questionnaire with 5 questions, and then the person should realize that that's right. The other thing is in my expertise as a digital learning analytics. When we're talking about online education, how we can control, how we can effectively measure the online learning is through analytics. Learning analytics is my tool that I can say to the teacher, you are doing very well in this specific assignment, or put the student watch this video, because the learning analytics allow me to identify the peak, how many students watch this video. And that's provide me some very professional or technical understanding that maybe your video is too long. You're making a video for 8 minutes, and you see the peak of the analytics show me that the student, the retention is just after 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes. And then, do you think it's in time to improve? Make it short, the videos. And that's all these kind of specific recommendations that as an expert we provide to teachers. It transforms the experience. Simple questions that they can improve flexibility. The teachers, they believe that students need to be physically in the classroom or in the, but there's some student that when we're talking about online education, their devices. So every time when we create a lesson, it needs to be able to the student to watch on any device and any table and any iPad, so on. And but the student, some teachers, they don't think about that kind of technicality part. But when we, as an expert, help them, the result, it's quite very important for them. And because some universities, they evaluate the teaching aspect, so they need to, the student evaluate the teachers. So most of them, they're very happy with the evaluation. But at the same time, the most important, again, the student learning outcomes improve. That is very important when we provide proper digital online education, and the main focus on student learning outcomes on digital education, it's skyrocket in terms of online education.
It's mind-blowing, right? How we can leverage technology. And I like that we're talking about these case studies now and the projects that you guys have and ongoing and the ones that you've done in the past. And so I think, right, what I have learned from you guys is that the new experience now, the digital learning experience, should not be expected to be on par with the physical classes. And we should also discover other tools that will help us have like a better digital learning experience, such as Verbella, was it Noodle Factory, was it? And James's startup, what was it, James? The startup that you have?
The startup is Challenge Hub.
Challenge Hub, and of course Tsunagaru EduTech, which leverages the data that educators can gain, right, from the students and craft content based on the interests or the performance of the students after content has been aired. So I like that there is emphasis on that more, and I wish more educators would see the value of these platforms more than like the cost and benefit aspect of it, right? I think you guys mentioned that there are cheaper alternatives like Google Classroom, but it doesn't have data analytics. It doesn't seek to replicate AR, right? Or challenges, as James has pointed out earlier. So I think the solutions and the case studies that you've mentioned are very futuristic, right? And really fit for Education 5.0, which puts humans in the center of it all, right? Education 4.0's emphasis was more about leveraging technology, right? And using machine learning and AI, right? To elevate education and the learner's experience, especially like the facilitator's experience. So now we're in Education 5.0, and they've made humans the focus of this. And again, right, and it's also based on the 5th Industrial Revolution. And I'd like to know what you think about the future of education. So you guys, I would like to say that you have very progressive stances when it comes to education and where it's heading now. So I'd like to know what you think about what the future of education will be. And I'd also like you to give your perspective when it comes to developing countries and the education, the future of education in our country as well. So let's start with James.
Yes, so I think that was a very good introduction to this important question. I'm very optimistic about the future of education, and the reason for that, and including for both developed and developing countries. And that is because I think we're just at the beginning of this, right? The technology we're using, we're talking about, people are trying to reproduce the offline in an online environment, but I think that's temporary, right? And I'm optimistic because I think that this will scale much, much better. And when it scales better, it gets cheaper and it gets easier to access. So in the past, even in a big lecture theatre, maybe there's up to 100 or 200 students, but this could, the technology is going to allow education to scale much, much, much bigger. And we're already seeing this with, these big platforms like Coursera and edX and things like this. So I think that the scaling is going to make a big effect. And this might not come from the existing institutions, right? So universities have this long legacy. It's very slow, very difficult to change, although a lot of work is being done to do that. And I hope that they continue to make those efforts to change. But you're seeing more from like Google, IBM, Microsoft, they're launching their own certificates, right? And it wasn't so long ago that I think it was the US government, they used to have some requirement where you needed a degree in order to be a federal employee or something like that, right?
Yes.
But since a year or two ago, that's no longer the case, right? So I think the more democratization of education, more scalability of education, I think this is where it will inevitably go, because this is how you're going to, because it will be cheaper and it will be using the analytics and things will allow you to do much more than any traditional lecture offline or online ever could.
Agreed. Thank you so much, James. That's a refreshing take, definitely, on the future of education. Julian, what do you think the future of education will look like?
Yeah, I really enjoyed James' answer, and just want to quote part of what Peter Diamandis says, one of the guy behind disruption and the concept around disruption. And so he identified for exponential technology what he called the 6D, and based on James' answer, I would like to use 3 of them, which is the digitalization, bringing the democratization, bringing the demonetization. And I think it's where we are for the education. It's really exciting to work in education right now. And what I saw is this opportunity today to take any kind of content from any kind of platform or solution, from YouTube to the university. And so there is a lot of criticism around what the universities are offering or not offering, etc. A lot of people don't know how works a university. The university, there is a lot of faculty research. It takes time, it's important, but also there is a lot of accreditations and credentials running with the public sector. So it's pretty complicated. I guess my point is what I'm the most excited about in terms of higher education in general. It's the opportunity of the personalization, meaning that maybe before you had the only one opportunity, only one path. And so you were supposed to follow this path, and it was the same for everybody. Now, the personalization, the adaptive learning, it's coming stronger, but also the personalization could be inside the university, but also could be outside, and you picking any kind of content you need because you want to do something different with your project, with your life. So you want to get a certification from Google. That's fine. It's open for you. Just take it. You want to learn how to make some video production. That's okay. You want to learn to code. You have plenty of content for free online. So it's what makes this digitalization really exciting, because you can follow a path that fits much more your perspective and your point of view on your own career.
Agreed. And it makes for a more skilled individual, right? Like, I'm excited for the generations to come, thinking about, a lot of courses are now made available for everyone. There's no gatekeeper almost, right? So if you want to learn how to hack, if you want to learn how to code, it's easier now compared to before. And I like that you also mentioned that, right? And it also gives us like a really good picture. I would say a really good picture. I'm an optimist, right? And it paints a very good picture of how the future generations will look like. They may be more intelligent than us, and the tools that they're now using are more advanced. And I'm very excited as to what types of products they will be making. Like right now, we have cryptocurrency, right? And NFTs. So it's exciting what types of products it will be made available because of access to education. It always starts there, right? Access to information and then education. Pablo, I'm very excited to also know what you think is the future of education.
Yes. From the startup point of view, we are innovative driven companies and enterprise. So we think different than sometimes academic point of view or teaching point of view. But we believe, and I believe, that the lifelong learning, it's the future. That's you don't need to have an only proper degree, stay 4 years at the university, then you finish, and then you enter in the market, job market, that this job doesn't exist anymore. The technology, we are moving in a really, really extremely fast pace that we need to keep learning, and it provides you. That is connected with the micro credentials, right? So macro credential is basically a digital certificate or data that they can, in the future, the companies will be able to see that person have maybe 10 courses, and that course is provided by Microsoft, by IBM, by the universities, by this so on. So now the universities are no more the silo of knowledge. The university need to accept that the tech companies in certain way are very driven a lot of changes for the future. And like kind of startups like us, we try to help them, and also try to help the institution in way of open a little more your traditional way of education, and accept that, for example, new technologies will transform that kind of experience. And just one example, like I know, we were talking about lifelong learning, and UNESCO just months ago and mentioned that the lifelong learning is going to be the human right. So everyone has the human right to keep learning. That's no barriers anymore to keep learning and provide this kind of micro credential. And that's very, very, very exciting, very, very fascinating, because when we're talking about this kind of little people in the small village in like Colombia, for example, and these kids, they didn't have access to education, but now they can go to YouTube and Google offering free courses to get a certification from Google. And think about it the other way. Most advanced tech company now, they don't request you for degrees. So the new companies like Tesla, Microsoft, or Google do only need professional experience. That's why they are creating their micro courses, their micro skills, their micro learning. That's why when startup companies like us, we believe that micro learning is the future. Very compact courses, very compact knowledge that could be potentially useful for the future. And that's something that affects also the learning spaces. In the Corona situation, pandemic changed the future of the education when the teacher is in the center, student listening, completely changed. So now the universities or institutions, they need to change even the core spaces. The form how you put the classes is completely have to change. And that's a case that we did about 5 years ago before the Corona. And I was participating in a project in South America. And it was very interesting because we did this kind of transform the lecture, how we can transform in the digital space. And we identified that even it was a large budget to transform the classes, the physical spaces, we identified that kind of faculty has so many projectors that they never use it. So I found that there were 3 projectors. It was their storage in the logistic area. There was iPads. And that's when I was involved in this project, and identified, said, why was no use? Because we didn't know how to use it, because we didn't have the training there. So they were want to transform the lectures again, the massive, beautiful, we are hybrid learning, but we don't know how to do it. So that again, startup like us are driven to help those institutions to transform the education, not only online education, but also the physical spaces. And the most important, connect with that kind of bring more updated content, right? to the traditional institutions. So.
So we're envisioning a future where content given to learners is based on what is effective for them, right? What
Correct.
will make them a lifelong learner.
Yeah, and in that case, we can. That's 1,000 of different data that mention that the future of skills in 2030 is going to be like innovation, creative thinking, teamwork, work as a team. So that's so many. So if we start thinking about that, the curriculum, the program should be transformed in that kind of value future works. That's, I think, is the click. But also not only that, when we're talking about Society 5.0, Society 5.0, it's in this Japan created this kind of concept that the future human-centered society using big data analytics and the cloud and the IoT technologies. So the classroom also need to be intelligent, smart classroom. When we're talking about smart classroom, need to connect all together. So that's something that when we start building those future curriculum programs, that would be very interesting. And again, it's important to collaborate with external, I believe, companies or startups that they are into the sector and they know what's happening in the industry. But yeah.
I love the points that you guys made, right? From the demonetization, the decentralization of education, and from how classrooms now are in my view, classrooms are now sources of data, important data that will help shape societies, right? And how this data is processed, of course, that's the part which changes societies, how we process and analyze that data and how we make programs and curriculums from that data. And I think this is the main gist of Education 5.0, putting humans at the center, placing importance on the data that is garnered from humans as they learn, and making solutions based on the data that has been garnered from humans. And I like that this has been the focus of our discussion tonight. And thank you so much for thank you so much for obliging us your time and your thoughts. And I think the conversation should be beyond this panel. I think it should be an ongoing discussion between stakeholders and movers and startups such as you guys. And I think people should know how they should contact you, right? How they should get in touch with you, should they want to continue this conversation, continue this discussion that we are now having about how we can make their learning experience and their learning learning centers more futuristic, data-driven, and smart and intelligent. So James, how do you think our audience can continue this conversation with you offline or online?
Sure. So I can share my email and my LinkedIn in the chat. Would that be a good way?
Sure, but we also have people who are watching us from YouTube or Facebook. So for those who are watching on Facebook, probably you just let them know what your LinkedIn is.
Okay. I would have to. So if
yeah, or any website at all.
Okay.
That
So
they can access.
If you go to you can email me james@challengehub.app.
James@challengehub.app. Yeah, I think our team has your details. So if you, and James, what types of conversations do you want to have with those who might want to reach out with you?
Yeah, so I'm very interested to connect with people who are in this industry in any capacity. I'm especially, my background is actually data, so I'm always interested in applying that to an education setting. But so there's that aspect, and then having run a startup, I'm very interested in the startup aspect as well as the academic side. So maybe that's a bit broad, but yeah, that's if anyone's interested to chat about any of those things, I'm very happy to talk.
Thanks so much, James. Julian, how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, I guess the best one it's LinkedIn. I'm almost always connected. I share on the chat, but I guess it's not enough. I share on the chat my LinkedIn profile.
Yes, LinkedIn.
So if you can, I don't know, maybe add it as a comment on YouTube. I don't know. I'm excited, like James. I'm excited about broadly everything in education, but I have to say that my focus is mostly in higher education and lifelong learning. So yeah, it's yeah. Any needs, any interest in chatting, I'm more than happy to have a conversation.
Thank you so much, Julian. Pablo, how can people get in touch with you?
Yes, well, in our YouTube channel, just write a comment, any question, or connect with us, and we will be happy to email to you back, or here, tsunagaruedutech.com. You just put in Google Tsunagaru Edutech, and then we will appear on Google. So, or LinkedIn, Pablo Riveros, and then I'm there. But yeah, like interested or connect with the startups communities, tech communities, but also industry in Philippines. Let's say the public sector. If someone from the education, please feel free to connect with us. We're very happy to have an initial discussion with you if you are facing any problem in this kind of digital transformation. So that's it.
Yes, especially if you want to reduce the friction when it comes to the transition, and if you want to have like a smarter online learning platform. Thanks so much, right? I think that's that. We wanna, if you have questions regarding this panel, I would like to invite you guys to message our panelists directly on LinkedIn so that you can have a more meaningful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. So like to briefly wrap up everything, right? We've learned that there are a great many barriers to education, especially in the digital transformation, but there are solutions available, and these solutions should not mimic what the physical one-on-one classes were, but it should be of a different it should be of the digital learning sphere. Julian, James, and Pablo, they've discussed solutions and also like case studies that I think would be helpful once you try to implement these solutions as well. So before we end this discussion, Pablo, as Tsunagaru Edutech, what are your last thoughts?
Yes, well, thank you very much, everyone involved in this webinar, and James, Julian, you, Joy, Jay, for all this great support, my team here in Japan, and everyone, the participants. Thank you very much for joining. I think it's a little bit late, but sorry for that. But it was very interesting conversation. So we're looking forward to keep in touch with you. Please feel free to connect with us. And yes, we are planning to do more this kind of open webinars that everyone can access and can have more equal knowledge in terms of what's happening. So please feel free to follow us on social media and our YouTube channel. And thank you very much. But yeah, we just have to keep learning. I think webinars are really part of the lifelong learning that we were talking today. So it's very, very important to keep learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much to our supporters, to FGN, Fukuoka Growth Next, Q, Co-working Space and Co-learning, Co-working and Co-learning Space, and of course, the company Cebu, and of course, Tsunagaru Edutech. This has been your host, Joy Garingo. Thank you so much for joining us again. Bye-bye and see you next time.